She was down to her last $20, barely scraping by after losing her job. Yet, when she saw an old man shivering by the corner store, something stirred inside her. Without hesitation, she walked over and handed him her last bill. She thought it was a small act, just a bit of help for someone worse off. But what she didn't know was that this one choice would lead to a twist in her life, something she'd never imagined. Hi everyone, welcome to Inspiration Story. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Sarah was used to hard days, but this winter felt especially cruel. After months of trying to make ends meet, she'd lost her job at a small bookstore that had closed down. With rent piling up and groceries becoming a luxury, she'd been counting every cent. That night, she walked down Main Street, wrapped in her worn-out coat, thinking about how to stretch her last $20. Maybe she'd buy some canned food, something that could last her through the week. As she passed the corner store, her eyes caught a glimpse of a man sitting on the sidewalk. He looked old and tired, his clothes thin against the biting wind. His hands were shaking, barely hidden in his torn gloves. It wasn't the first time she'd seen him there. Most people walked past, their eyes averted, but tonight, there was something different. Sarah stopped. She looked at the man and then at the crumpled $20 bill in her hand. She knew she needed it, but something inside her couldn't bear to walk away. She approached him, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle but uncertain. The man looked up, surprised someone had stopped. He nodded, though his chattering teeth told a different story. "Just a rough night," he murmured. Without a second thought, Sarah pressed the $20 into his hand. "Here," she said, "get something warm to eat, or maybe find a place to stay, just for the night." The man looked down at the money, his eyes welling up. He mumbled a soft thank you, his voice trembling, and Sarah gave him a small smile before turning to leave. As she walked away, she felt a strange sense of peace. She hadn't solved all his problems, but maybe she'd made his night just a little bit easier. Little did Sarah know, this single act of kindness had set something unexpected in motion. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the familiar chill of her drafty apartment. She wrapped her coat around herself, trying to shake off the cold, and went to the kitchen to find something for breakfast. She barely had anything left, a half-empty box of tea, a few slices of bread. The $20 she'd given away was her last, and now she felt the weight of that decision. Just as she was about to pour herself a glass of water, she noticed something strange. There, on the small mat outside her door, was an envelope. It was plain, no markings, no name on it, just a simple white envelope left at her door. Her heart raced a little. She didn't know what to expect. Maybe it was from her landlord, another reminder about the overdue rent. She picked it up, her fingers cold against the paper, and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short note written in neat, careful handwriting. "Thank you for your kindness. People like you are rare, and sometimes, life has a way of giving back. Go to the cafe on 3rd Street today. Your kindness will be rewarded." Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who had left this? Was it some sort of joke? She thought back to the old man from last night, wondering if somehow he'd had a hand in this. But how could he? He barely had anything himself. She stood there for a moment, debating whether to go. After all, what could a trip to a cafe possibly bring her? She had no money, no reason to go out, and plenty of other worries on her mind. But something about the note, it felt genuine, almost like a sign. After a few minutes of hesitation, she put on her coat, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and headed out into the cold. The cafe on 3rd Street was a small, cozy place she used to visit back when things were easier. She hadn't stepped foot in there for months, not since money had become so tight. The warmth of the cafe welcomed her as she opened the door, a contrast to the biting cold outside. Sarah looked around, unsure of what or who she was supposed to find. The familiar hum of conversations, the clinking of coffee cups, and the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. She felt out of place, unsure why she was there, wondering if it had all been a strange prank. She was about to leave when the barista called out her name. Surprised, Sarah turned to see a young man behind the counter holding a steaming cup of coffee and a warm, fresh pastry. "Sarah, right?" he asked with a friendly smile. She nodded slowly, unsure how he knew her name. "This is for you," he said, sliding the coffee and pastry across the counter. "Compliments of a friend." "A friend?" Sarah repeated, confused. She didn't have any friends who could afford to treat her to breakfast, let alone leave mysterious notes. She took the items, feeling a bit dazed, as she wondered who could have done this. She sat down at a small table near the window, sipping the coffee and nibbling at the pastry. Her mind kept circling back to the note, the $20 she'd given to the old man, and now, this mysterious gesture. It didn't make any sense. Just as she was finishing her coffee, a man walked over to her table. He was well dressed, wearing a neat coat and a warm scarf. He looked a little out of place in this small, modest cafe, his presence almost magnetic. "Sarah?" he asked, his tone gentle but direct. She looked up, taken aback. "Yes, that's me." The man smiled warmly, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. "I'm glad you came." "I saw what you did last night," he began, his voice soft but serious. Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean, with the man outside the store?" He nodded. "It's rare to see such kindness. I want to thank you for what you did, not just for him, but for reminding me of something important." Sarah listened, both curious and cautious, wondering what this stranger had to say. "There's something I'd like to offer you," he continued, leaning in slightly. "It's a gesture of thanks, a way to show that your kindness didn't go unnoticed." Sarah felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, curiosity, and a lingering feeling of disbelief. The man took a deep breath, as if choosing his words carefully. "I believe in second chances," he said, his eyes steady on hers. "I once struggled myself and had someone help me when I least expected it. That person changed my life, and now I try to do the same for others, whenever I can." Sarah listened, her heart pounding. She still couldn't understand why he was telling her this or how it connected to her. "I'd like to help you, Sarah," he continued, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket and placing it gently on the table. "Inside this envelope is an opportunity. It's not charity. It's a chance to start over, to build something meaningful. If you choose to accept it, I think it could change your life." Sarah stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. She hadn't even opened it, and yet it felt heavy with possibility. "Why me?" she whispered, barely able to speak. The man smiled, a look of genuine kindness in his eyes. "Because last night, you showed that kindness doesn't depend on wealth. You gave when you had nothing. That's rare, and it's worth supporting." Sarah felt a wave of emotions: surprise, gratitude, disbelief. She looked down at the envelope, still hesitant. "Go ahead," he encouraged. "Take a look." With shaky fingers, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, neatly typed and signed with the man's name. It explained that he ran a small business and wanted to offer her a job, along with a temporary stipend to help her get back on her feet. The job would pay enough to cover her rent and more, enough to finally give her stability. Her eyes filled with tears as she read, each word making her heart swell with a mix of relief and gratitude. This was more than she could have ever hoped for. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to thank you," she said, overwhelmed. The man shook his head. "Just keep being yourself, Sarah. That's thanks enough." They shared a quiet moment, and Sarah felt the weight of her struggles lift just a little, replaced by a feeling of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. In the days that followed, Sarah could hardly believe the turn her life had taken. She accepted the job and quickly found herself adjusting to the routine, the steady paycheck, the chance to breathe a little easier. Each day felt like a small victory: a hot meal, a paid bill, the security of knowing she had a roof over her head. The kindness she'd shown that night, a single $20 bill, had come back to her in a way she'd never dreamed of. And with every passing day, she felt more grateful. She saved little by little, no longer fearing the cold nights or empty cupboards. Instead, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Months went by, and one evening, she found herself back at the corner store where it had all started. She thought about that old man she'd helped, wondering if he was all right, if he'd managed to get by. She hadn't seen him again, but his memory stayed with her. Every so often, she'd pay forward a little of what she'd been given, a meal here, a coat there, always remembering the impact of that one small act. One day, while tidying up her apartment, Sarah found that original letter the man had left on her doorstep. She held it in her hands, feeling the texture of the paper, remembering the hope it had brought. The words echoed in her mind, "Your kindness will be rewarded." She smiled to herself, realizing how true it had been. Sarah's life was far from perfect, but now it was filled with possibility. She had a job she enjoyed, a safe place to call home, and, perhaps most importantly, a renewed belief in the power of compassion. That one small act on a freezing night had not only saved her but given her a purpose. As she stood by the window, looking out at the bustling street below, she felt a quiet resolve. She'd continue to spread kindness, knowing that sometimes, even the smallest gesture could change someone's life. As Sarah settled into her new routine, she often reflected on the series of events that had brought her to this point. Life had a way of surprising her, but this time, the surprises were good. The job she had been offered turned out to be more than just a paycheck. It was a stepping stone toward rediscovering her confidence and purpose. The company she worked for was a small, family-run business that prided itself on treating employees like family. Her new boss, Mr. Carter, the same man who had given her the envelope, was patient and kind, teaching her the ropes with a genuine interest in her success. Sarah quickly grew to enjoy the work, which involved managing inventory and assisting customers in a cozy little shop that sold handmade goods. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of belonging. She no longer dreaded mornings or worried constantly about how she would make it through the week. Each day brought her closer to rebuilding the life she had once dreamed of, and with every small achievement, her self-worth blossomed. One afternoon, while she was organizing a shelf of ceramic mugs, Mr. Carter approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Sarah," he began, "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." She paused her work, turning to face him. "Is everything all right?" He smiled warmly. "Everything is more than all right. In fact, I've been really impressed with your work. Your dedication, your kindness toward customers, it's exactly what we need here." Sarah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. That means a lot." He reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope, handing it to her. "I'd like you to open this later, when you have a moment. It's an opportunity for growth if you're interested." Her heart raced as she took the envelope, the weight of it familiar yet exciting. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'll take a look." That evening, as she sat in her small but cozy apartment, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter detailing an opportunity to become a manager at the shop. The position came with a significant pay increase and the chance to take on more responsibilities. Mr. Carter explained that he believed in her potential and wanted to invest in her future. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she read the letter. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a testament to how far she had come. She thought back to the freezing night when she had given away her last $20, never imagining that act of kindness would lead her here. The next day, Sarah eagerly accepted the promotion. She threw herself into her new role, determined to live up to Mr. Carter's faith in her. The additional income allowed her to finally pay off her debts and even start saving for the future. She also began volunteering at a local shelter, paying forward the kindness she had received. Months turned into a year, and Sarah's life continued to transform. She became an integral part of the shop, forging strong relationships with her co-workers and customers. Her once dim outlook on life was now filled with optimism and purpose. One day, as she was helping a customer find the perfect gift, she noticed a familiar figure standing by the door. It was the old man she had helped on that cold winter night. He looked healthier, his clothes clean and warm, and his posture more upright. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She quickly finished assisting the customer and made her way toward him. "Hello," she said with a warm smile. "It's so good to see you." The man looked at her, his eyes twinkling with recognition. "Hello, young lady. I've been hoping to find you." They sat down at a small table near the window, and the man shared his story. After Sarah had given him the $20, he had used it to get a hot meal and stay at a shelter for the night. The shelter staff had helped him connect with resources, and he had since managed to turn his life around. He now had a small apartment and a part-time job, and he was working toward full independence. "I'll never forget what you did for me," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You gave me hope when I had none." That $20 was more than money, it was a reminder that there's still kindness in the world. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "You've inspired me just as much as you say I helped you. Seeing you here, doing so well, means the world to me." They talked for a while longer, sharing their journeys and reflecting on how a single act of kindness had changed both their lives. As the man left the shop, Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that the ripple effects of compassion could extend far beyond what she could see. That evening, as Sarah closed up the shop, she found herself looking out at the street, the lights twinkling in the distance. Life was still unpredictable, but she had learned that even in the darkest moments, kindness and hope could light the way. Sarah's life continued to flourish, her days now filled with purpose and positivity. The shop had become more than just a workplace, it was a second home. Customers greeted her warmly, her co-workers treated her like family, and she found herself becoming a trusted figure in the community. One afternoon, as she was preparing a display of handcrafted jewelry near the front window, a young girl and her mother walked into the shop. The girl, no older than 7, had wide, curious eyes and clutched a small purse in her hands. Sarah smiled warmly at them. "Hello. Let me know if you need any help," she said. The girl tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered something. Her mother nodded and gently encouraged her toward Sarah. "Hi," the girl said shyly. "I want to buy a present for my teacher. She's really nice, and I want her to know I like her." Sarah knelt to meet the girl's eye level. "That's a wonderful idea. Do you have something in mind?" The girl opened her purse, revealing a handful of coins. "I don't have much, but I want something special." Sarah felt a pang of emotion at the sight. She thought back to her own struggles and how a little kindness had turned her life around. She glanced around the shop and picked up a delicate bracelet with a small charm. "How about this?" she said. "It's simple but very special, just like your teacher." The girl's eyes lit up. "It's perfect." But, she hesitated, looking at her coins. "I don't think I have enough." Sarah smiled softly. "You know what? Today, it's on me. Consider it a gift for being so thoughtful." The girl's face broke into a radiant smile. "Really? Thank you so much." Her mother looked at Sarah with gratitude. "That's very kind of you. Thank you." As the girl skipped out of the shop, clutching the gift, Sarah felt a warm glow in her chest. Moments like these reminded her of the power of small gestures. Later that evening, as Sarah locked up the shop, Mr. Carter approached her. He had been observing her interaction with the little girl earlier. "You've got a good heart, Sarah," he said. "It's people like you who make this place special." Sarah blushed slightly. "I just try to do what feels right. People have been kind to me, and I want to pass it on." Mr. Carter nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Kindness has a way of coming full circle. You've proven that time and again." Over the next few months, Sarah became even more involved in the community. She organized charity drives at the shop, collecting food and clothing for those in need. Customers were eager to contribute, inspired by her enthusiasm and genuine care. One evening, as she was sorting through donations, she came across a familiar coat. It was the same worn-out coat she had donated months ago, the one she had worn during her toughest times. Seeing it brought a flood of memories, and she realized just how far she had come. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Mr. Carter. "Check your email when you get a chance. I've sent you something important." Curious, Sarah grabbed her laptop and opened her email. There, in her inbox, was a message from Mr. Carter with the subject line, "A new opportunity." The email detailed a chance for Sarah to become a partner in the business. Mr. Carter explained that he was planning to expand the shop and wanted her to be a part of it. He believed her dedication and vision were exactly what the business needed to grow. Sarah stared at the screen, her heart racing. This was more than she had ever dreamed of. She thought back to the freezing night when she had given away her last $20, never imagining that one act of kindness would lead her here.